Thank you, everybody. Welcome to the EES Moment in Time Realization and Making a Difference. Today we have Brian Hooker with us, the Chief Medical Officer for the Children's Health Fund, who in the course of a life looking in medicine, one day someone walked up to him and passed some information on to him that not only changed his mind but affected his heart. And then in the course of this, it began to be, instead of looking at it from a scientific point of view, it became an emotional and personal and dedicated point of view because it happened to him. So thank you, Robert, and welcome. We appreciate and admire the efforts of what you've done with the Children's Health Fund and what Bobby has done.
Right.
I sit and am very proud of him as he sits and fights it out with the evilness of what is called our healthcare system. I have said for 50 years, based on the experience I had in 1975, that the battle for the souls of humankind would be fought in healthcare. And I believe that where we are today and what's keeping our country from being funded and running, what's left of it, is over healthcare.
Right.
So there has to be honesty, integrity, and truth in healthcare. And it has to be that you could trust your doctor. But anytime you have something that is for profit, there's the free will and the choices that people make is where the true nature of your spiritual reality comes into play. So could you stop a moment, take a deep breath, and tell us about that moment when a young man walked up to you and changed your whole life, and then tell us about the moment your life was changed again.
Well, I am a scientific researcher, and back in the 1990s, I was minding my own business. I was working for a Department of Energy laboratory, and honestly, I had no reason at that point to question allopathic medicine. I grew up in a public health family. I received a few vaccines because back, honestly, in the 1960s and 70s, when I was vaccinated, there were so few. So when it came time, my son was born in 1998. When it came time to vaccinate him, I didn't even know that there was such a thing as a vaccine adverse event. But his vaccines, first of all, were loaded with mercury. They were loaded with aluminum, and he did not react well to them at all. He was tracking slowly. He was a sickly child, but he was tracking normally until his 15-month well baby checkup. And he had an ear infection. He was sick, and we actually asked the practitioner, should we vaccinate him today? He's sick. And she said, oh, well, we do it all the time. That's not a problem. So he received 3 different vaccines, 2 that contained mercury, 1 that was a live virus vaccine that day. And he immediately started to fever, high-pitched scream, and he fevered for 18 days. Over that 18 days, we controlled his fever with baby aspirin and Tylenol. We kept on calling our medical practitioner. They said, oh, no, just rotate the baby aspirin and the Tylenol.
Heartbreaking.
And that will control the fever, and he'll come out of it and he'll be fine. Well, he wasn't. He was then diagnosed 3 months later with full-blown autism. He lost all eye contact. He lost words. He lost joint attention. He was medically unwell. His bowel system just, collapsed in front of us. And so that was such a cataclysmic event for us. And I have to say, the moment that then we had our sort of come to Jesus was when he was 2 years old. We found an integrative practitioner who looked at us and said, your son is very, very toxic. He's toxic in mercury. He's toxic in aluminum. He's toxic in arsenic from the water. He's toxic from antimony in fire retardant baby clothes. No more vaccines. He said, and he said it just like that. He said, no more vaccines for your son. His system is too fragile to take it. He should never get a vaccine. And that resonated so much with me because we knew, it, just like the nose on my face, that when he had his 15-month vaccines, everything changed. And at that point, this practitioner...
So do you know what those vaccines were at 15 months?
Yes. Yeah, they were the Hib vaccine, which is Haemophilus influenzae B, the DTaP vaccine, and the oral polio was a live virus polio vaccine that he received.
Scary.
Yeah. And combined, he was exposed to 50 micrograms of mercury just in that single doctor's visit. And he should have never had. Mercury does not belong in your body. It does not belong in fillings. It does not belong in vaccines. It does in any way, shape, or form.
Do you think, Robert, do you think they always knew that and they used that amalgamate composition to affect maybe above the blood-brain barrier, getting mercury into the brain? Or do you think that it was just the easiest substance to use for fillings?
I think that it was an easy substance to use, and I think that, quite honestly, it was so convenient that it was used as a preservative in multi-dose vials of vaccines, that nobody really bothered to do the math and look at the total exposure, the total load. You know, there may be some nefarious associations behind that. I'm not necessarily aware of them, but it was bad science. Somebody should have been watching. People were asleep at the switch, and they were lazy, and they were too busy collecting money to really do the best for our children.
Like we said, for profit.
Exactly.
Like in the legendary pandemic vaccine.
Correct.
You had to get 60% of your patient load to get $40 per.
Correct.
You know, which really turned out to be 10 times that.
Absolutely. There are people that are millionaires because of that vaccine incentive. There are pediatricians that, and one of the major HMOs says that if 63% of the practice is fully vaccinated, then you can get upwards to $600 per vaccinated patient, which if you have a practice of 2,000 patients, that's over $1 million a year. And so money talks. And unfortunately, it talked louder than my son. And my son then was very, very sickly after his 15-month vaccines.
Well, I'll tell you something we'd like to do, Robert, because I want you to keep telling this story about the person that changed your life again. We're going to reach out to our center owners, and maybe that, I don't quite know how to do it.
Yeah.
We can reach out to our center owners, and they have people to come in, because I'm a devout believer in the power of prayer, non-local healing. And we can take people who are defending children, and the parents and the mothers, and bringing their children, people who are coming to us, and ask them while they're in the program doing what they're doing to put a prayer out. So we'd like to make sure we know his son, where your son is and where he's located, so that we can give people specific intentional directions that while you're here, stop a moment for Robert and his son, and get involved, being spiritually conscious, energetically conscious, and physically conscious in supporting the Children's Defense Fund.
Absolutely. And I'm Brian, by the way.
I met Brian.
No, you're fine. I admire Robert, and that's Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Yeah,
so,
I love him.
Brian,
I watch him deal with the bureaucracy and the evilness of the structure of what he's trying to change.
Exactly.
And his whole family turns against him. This is somebody who has destiny, whether we like it or not.
Exactly.
You know, if somebody was chosen for something, I'm glad Donald had sense enough to make that move.
Absolutely. And he was somebody when parents had nobody to turn to.
Nobody.
Because of their children being so sick, he was fighting to get mercury out of the waterways. You know, he cleaned up the Hudson River. He you know, single-handedly, through his legal actions and through his own sweat equity, he cleaned up the Hudson River, and he did that for waterways. And then when a mom came to him and said, you know what, the biggest source of mercury for our children are these vaccines. And he paid attention. He was one of so very, very few that actually paid attention.
God, think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it.
And so many people knew and just turned a blind eye. But Robert F. Kennedy Jr. did not. He's made a difference.
Well, just one other thing so I don't want to be waving the flag for him.
Yes.
But when you take a look at him at our age and you look in that time period, here's somebody that's experienced everything.
Right.
You're not going to lie to him about drugs, and you're not going to lie to him about the effects. And he knows it's all lies.
Right.
And when you look at him, he's overcome everything that everybody's ever had an excuse to rationalize for why they're not worth a damn.
Right.
And here's Bobby. He's been as high and as crazy and as drunk and as fratted up and as a rich elite boy. And yet here he is down defending moms
Mm-hmm.
and their children when they have mom has nowhere to turn and the system in its structure turns on them.
Exactly.
That means that anybody who looks at them, everybody has a chance to correct, to grow, to find redemption, and to face themselves and move forward. So then there was an afternoon when someone came to you
Yes.
and told you who was this person, if we can say who they are, and then what did they tell you? And then the effect of that story, please, Brian.
Well, the practitioner that set us on the right path for my son when my son was 2 years old, I'll never forget it because it was my son's second birthday. So it was, let's see, February 10th, 2000. And his name was Dr. Stephen Smith. He's an integrative practitioner in the state of Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think he would mind me mentioning and attributing my son's healing to him.
Bless him.
But he he showed us a different way. He showed us energetics straight away. He showed us how to
explain energetics. Just give us a brief for all our audience as we educate them about the nature of their electrical self. Explain energetics as he put it in context and explained it to you, please, Brian.
Well, he could tell just by the frequencies of different objects and how my son's electrical frequencies were interacting with those objects.
Brilliant.
What he was,
Brilliant.
what my son was allergic to, what my son would react to, what was safe for my son. And we found out that he was allergic to eggs. We found out that he was allergic to dairy, just through
Processed food.
yeah, just muscle testing. Muscle testing and primarily processed food. And in addition to that, we were able to do some comprehensive medical testing. And I'm a scientist. I want the data. I want the data behind myself.
That's why God invented you. We like obsessive, compulsive people who need the data to reinforce their own disbelief in reality,
Right.
but to also support other people's disbelief in what's really true and real.
Exactly. And he worked
thank
with
you.
us.
So thank you, Brian, for being you.
Well, thank you very much. Dr. Smith worked with us where we were, and we got the data. We saw how toxic my son was because of heavy metals in his environment. And I want to stress, yes, vaccines were the prime mover, but we also had arsenic in our water. And we used to get notifications from our municipal water supply of high arsenic. And so I knew arsenic, when we tested it in my son's hair, urine, and feces, I knew where it came from. It came from the water. So he had to have bottled water. He had to have purified water in order, to detox
the whole epigenetics of all of that.
Right. And we used, water like Fiji water to get rid of aluminum. Which was also from vaccines. And we also had to get rid of all of his fire retardant pajamas and baby clothes because they were loaded with antimony, another toxic heavy metal. And so we saw all these things in their system, and we started by eliminating the bad, and then allowing the body to heal itself.
Did at the same time you and your wife look at your own selves?
Yes.
Okay, this has become important. The caregiver, Brian, never thinks about the caregiver.
Exactly.
But the fact that he's representing strong and maybe more than normal toxicity, okay, to that it's so recognizable, but aren't we all in the environment? Aren't we all a part of the environment and all the toxicity that comes?
Absolutely. And we even ran genetic tests to figure out, where I was toxic, where my wife was toxic, and where my son was toxic. And when we saw those sensitivities very, very well, and it seemed like if I had a sensitivity, my son got it. If my wife had a sensitivity, my son got it. He got kind of the best, the worst of all worlds, because of his.
So that's genetics, you think?
Yeah, it was partially genetics. I think that there's much more to it than genetics because there's epigenetics as well.
The environment that you're
Right, the environment that he's exposed to, and I think that under the right conditions, my son would have thrived. He was not. He in allopathic medicine and in the toxic soup that we have in the world today, my son was also exposed to genetically modified food. We did not know any better. But genetically modified food substances started to be marketed in the United States in 1996. That's when GM corn and GM soy were approved for human consumption. My son was born in 1998. So every time he had soy formula, which he had very rarely, fortunately, we breastfed at least, through his first birthday. We could have done longer. Yeah, in hindsight, we could have done longer. But think of all the glyphosate that my son was exposed to. And glyphosate plus vaccine is a horrible connection.
When you look at glyphosate in dairy,
yes,
this is the point. When you watch that, the process goes from the time you plant that seed all the way to that body is consuming it. Brian, they have to know that they're structuring. There's too many scientists. I mean, I go back to the Nazis. I'm at the Nuremberg trials. There are too many scientists that know too much about the genetics to not to be manipulated. And when you look at the 9 tenets of the Nuremberg trials, they knew then. Yes. And all they did was build off of that science. Both the Japanese and both the Germans were building the Western culture of food consumption and habits based on that whole protocol. Don't you think?
It's so unfortunate. No, so I completely agree with you that people knew what was going on.
Like fluoride in water.
Monsanto knew what was going on. Now owned by Bayer. Bayer was one of the companies that was around during the Third Reich.
They were the Germans' industrial complex. Bayer was it.
Right. You think of the gas chambers in Zyklon B. Zyklon B was manufactured by Bayer.
Same people who made a salicylic acid, aspirin.
Exactly. Same people who have now acquired glyphosate from Monsanto. But a paper that said that Monsanto's glyphosate was safe has stood for 25 years. Under the Kennedy watchful eye, it was just retracted.
Yep.
Glyphosate is not safe for human consumption. It is a surrogate of an amino acid called glycine. Yep. And it can replace glycine in specific pathways, and it will wreak havoc. It will cause collagen to become become very fragile and brittle. It will cause the collagen to break. It can also acts as a chelator, so it can move metals and retoxify children by moving metals around the environment.
When you were describing it causing it to calcify collagen, what is one of the recognizable or two side effects that our people can look at? We're always looking for ways to heal things.
Right.
And if you know what you're talking about when they have too much glyphosate and there is this collagen skin, all of that's breaking down, what kind of signs would a patient or a client look for to see their toxicity?
Well, the first thing that you would look for would be just skin pallor. If a child just doesn't really, we should look pink and ruddy. Right. We have blood flowing through our system. So just a pale skin, low muscle tone is another dead giveaway. And then also, one of the things, if I can also mention, is that when you consume animal products that have been fed glyphosate-laced grain, then the amount of accumulation of glyphosate is much, much higher because animal feed standards are much less stringent than human food standards. So the amount of glyphosate residues in animal foods that animals are consuming, so this would be beef, this would be pork, this would be chicken, this would be dairy, are all loaded with glyphosate. And they claim that the testing is appropriate, that it's a safe level of glyphosate, but I would contend that the safe level of glyphosate has never been appropriately determined, and it's much, much lower than anybody at the at the three-letter agencies has ever really said or ever really represented. So you have to be very, very careful.
And
Glyphosate finds its way into everything.
but where does it store itself if it can stay and build up in the body? Because I just want to cover this and then we need to
Yes.
do our close. If we keep it in our, how does it store it in the body? And then we know that detoxing is the process, but how does it store itself in the body for longevity? Where is it?
It will integrate into proteins directly because it is a surrogate for glycine. Okay, glycine is an amino acid. It's an amino acid that that we can produce, that our bodies produce. But glyphosate is a structural second cousin, if you will, to glycine. And so where glycine integrates into proteins, glycine is spongy,
Right.
and it gives proteins flexibility. Where glyphosate is integrated in, it is not flexible, and so therefore the collagen, the elastin, it becomes brittle.
Okay, so now, how important, as you go back and look at your son and yourself and your wife, how important does the system and methodology of detoxing come into play in all of this that we're talking about? And do you think that it's seriously important that as you go through a detoxing process, you add detoxing baths to it? And what is your ideas and thoughts about that?
When we detoxed my son and specifically got rid of heavy metals, he got better. Okay.
Thank
And I do not know where we would be with my son if we had not detoxed. We spent the first 8 years of his life detoxing just mercury and the other toxic heavy metals. It's not like when you detox mercury, you detox other metals at the same
Sure,
time.
yeah.
So
yeah.
I mean,
Whatever attaches a bond.
right. And so it wasn't like we were just detoxing mercury for 8 years and then switched to aluminum or whatever. But that was essential. I see his trajectory. He's still a non-speaker. He does not speak. He speaks using a modality called spellers, and he can communicate beautifully using a letterboard or a typing
wonderful.
keyboard. And he's absolutely brilliant.
Which is a lot of times a side effect
Yes,
of autism.
it is a side effect of autism,
That
but we preserved
hypothalamic
his brain.
focus, that hypothalamic focus and those things like that. Yeah.
We preserved his brain because we
you.
detoxified him. We preserved what he can do now. He's brilliant in calculus. He's brilliant in physics. When he first emerged and started to openly communicate with us, by the way, that was his 26th birthday when he first was able to communicate with us. He knew German. We had no idea how we'd learn these things, but God takes care of our
Yeah,
kids even when we
Deutschland,
can't.
sure.
Yeah.
That's why the Children's Defense Fund. So detoxing becomes important, being
Yes.
aware, signs to look for. And Brian, thank you so very much for coming to contribute to the EES's spectrum of knowledge for people to be informed about taking care of their children. Please, everybody, go to the Children's Defense Fund. Please tell your son and your wife. Tell your wife we said she has excellent taste in men. And please tell your son that Sandra and I and all our owners send him our love and
thank
tell
you
him to
so
be strong and tell him to be courageous and tell him how to figure out how to make me look younger.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
we covet your prayers. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, that's the most important thing. Thank you, everybody. Okay, everybody, the end of this story. We shall look forward to see you and look at the innovation and the understanding that comes of the deception we've lived under about who we are, why we are, and what our purposes are. And thanks to Brian and his insight and the courage of his wife and child and his job at the Children's Defense Fund, we're all better off this day. Until next time, you're loved and appreciated. Get that energetic power and be great. Thank you.